Hello everyone. My name is Ziyan Liu from T-Lab UBC, and today I'm going to share a paper titled "The SiReRAG: The Indexing Similar and Related Information for Multi-Hop Reasoning." Um, Nowadays the RAG is a very common method in large language model reasoning, and so I will give a very brief explanation about what RAG is. A RAG means retrieval augmented generation. And RAG augments large language models with retrieved external knowledge. And this helps the model give answers that are more accurate, up to date, and traceable with sources. The typical pipeline is we collect the data and split it into chunks. We create embeddings for them and build an index. So we can retrieve all those candidates and we re-rank and select the best candidates part so we can build a context for the large language models. So the model will generate the answers with citations. But there are some limits to keep in mind that the results depend on the quality of retrieval and indexing. Also, long context make it very hard to select and organize the most relevant information. The RAG indexing organizes a very large amount of data, so it is an upstream step before retrieval. And after indexing, we obtain a searchable pool of text candidates from the corpus and that are ready for retrieval. But we know the good indexing makes retrieval faster and more accurate. But today we highlight a key gap that we find that most existing methods focus on only one side, either similarity or relatedness, and this limits a full understanding of the dataset. The similarity looks at the semantic distance between text pieces. In short, we know the texts that mean similar things are close, but the relatedness looks at how texts are connected through signals like entities or propositions, and two texts can be related even if they are not semantically similar. So, for example, if they mention the same person or place, if we only model similarity, we may miss important connections. If we only model relatedness, we may miss semantically close evidence. Let me raise an example to observe the difference between similarity and relatedness. And here we can see the query is who is the father of the artist who painted Head 1? And here we retrieved three relevant texts. And we can see there are three entities in the chunks. As I mentioned before, similarity means two chunks are close in meaning. And in this figure, we can find that the chunks about entity 1 and entity 2 are similar. If we only combine entity 1 and 2, the model is pushed towards the wrong answer, like the Francis Bacon. And that is not the answer we want. The texts look close semantically, but they do not complete the reasoning chain, especially in a multi-hop reasoning scenario. And the relatedness means two chunks are linked by shared signals like entities or topics. And in this figure, chunks about entity 2 and 3 are related because they share a topic about the introduction of Francis Bacon. But if we only combine entity 2 and 3, we still may not reach the correct answer, especially in long contexts where the model can miss key details like the painter of Head 1. Because this is a two-hop question, and this query in this figure, and we must retrieve and synthesize the right entities chunks across both hops. Here is a calculation made by me, and I very simply calculate the similarity score, a different similarity score. One is based on the OpenAI embedding, and the other one is used the word frequency of user BM25. And we can see the similarity among the query and the three relevant chunks. If we focus on the embedding models, we can see the similarity between the query and the trunk 3 are the lowest, right? But the trunk 3 is necessary one, and the key information is inside the trunk 3, but we cannot retrieve that. And if we use BM25, we can see that among the three trunks, the third trunk is also the lowest, and we cannot retrieve these passages correctly. So intuitively, we need to combine similarity and relatedness, right? So, but before the author proposed their methods, they conducted a set of preliminary experiments to validate this idea. First, in a similarity track, the authors encode each passage into an embedding and run the Gaussian mixture models, which is a soft clustering method for soft on these passages embeddings, and they get a summary of these clusters. And in the relatedness track, they first use a large language model to extract the topic of each passage, and then just repeat the same things in the similarity track, and like encode these topics into embeddings and run the Gaussian mixture models for the soft clustering, and finally they have groups of clusters. So to evaluate how they perform, the authors run these two clustering approaches on the Musi question dataset. They convert each cluster into within cluster passage pairs and compare those pairs against gold pairs from the dataset under two settings. First one is supporting only. They use only supporting passages, which is shown as shown in the figure, to form the within cluster pairs to evaluate coverage of clean and essential evidence. And under all mode, they use both supporting and distractor passages as gold to form the within cluster pairs, evaluating the coverage in a more realistic and noisier setting. So the cluster pairs evaluating, and another point is that they use overlap score. The overlap score means among the gold standard pairs hit by the similarity or relatedness-based method, how many are also hit by the other method. So it measures the degree of overlap between the two clustering methods in terms of correct connections. Here I read a very simple example which contains only 5, like we say, the passages, including 3 supporting one, the A, B, C, and 2 distractors which are irrelevant or they do not contain the right information, D and E. And under the supporting only setting, the gold pairs are the within cluster pairs among A, B, and C, which is AB, AC, and BC, with predicted clusters A, B, D, and CE, which are 2 clusters we calculated out. The predicted pairs are AB, AD, BD, and CE. So the supporting only coverage is equals to 1/3 because only one AB is a correct supporting pair. And under the all setting, the gold pairs are all within cluster pairs among A, B, C, D, E, which there are 10 pairs in total. With the same prediction, we hit AB, AD, BD, and CE. So all coverage equals to 4 out of 10. And in their experiment, first we look at coverage. Under the supporting only, coverage is higher, but the highest is only 19.14%. So this shows that either method alone covers only a very limited portion of the correct connections. Next, we can look at overlap. The overlap between these two methods, the correct connections is only about half to 2/3, and meaning the two methods are not equivalent and capture the different correct links. We can easily find that the overlap score measures the degree of overlap between the two clusters methods, which is a similarity-based and relatedness-based in terms of correct connections. A lower value indicates a stronger complementarity between these two methods, while a higher value suggests a greater consistency. So it's very obvious that combining these two methods can cover a more correct connections, so it can enhance the knowledge integration and the retrieval performance. So the author proposes the SiReRAG method. The main idea is to model these two kinds of signals. One is similarity and one is the relatedness. And on the left, we can see that they built a similarity tree by clustering semantically similar chunks and creating recursive summaries following the wrap-top approach. What is wrap-top? Wrap-top is a method for complex and multi-step reasoning task. It first performs soft clustering like the Gaussian mixture model, a very simple method on semantically similar text chunks, then generates recursive summaries for each cluster to form a hierarchical structure from chunks to summaries to higher level summaries. And this lets retrieval use both fine-grained evidence and higher level synthesized information. And let's get back to the methodology. And on the right side, we can see they built a relatedness tree by extracting entities and grouping by shared entities into proposition aggregates, and also create recursive summaries just like before. And in the end, they flattened all nodes from both trees into one retrieval pool. And query time, we can retrieve the top candidates from this unified pool and just let the large language models answer. And using both trees helps similarity finds text that is close in meaning, while relatedness connects evidence across entities or topics. And this combination is obvious and important for multi-hop questions. But before construction, we have a very practical question. If we place more abstract chunks higher in the tree, can we beat the Raptor's simpler design? The intuition is that the different parts of a document have different abstraction levels. So a more tree-like hierarchy might help. But the author runs a test on the quantity dataset. They label chunks with GPT-4o as low or high abstraction. And summaries begin at level 2, so level 2 holds both high abstraction chunks and summaries of low abstraction chunks, and the upper levels are recursive summaries just like before. Retrieval uses the same embedding model and the top 10 setting across methods. This is the basic experimental setting. And the results shows no difference. Since the hierarchical design adds computation and yields no clear improvement, the authors conclude that what really matters is indexing the correct information, but not the exact layer a chunk is placed on. So therefore, they keep the Raptor style pipeline for the similarity side. And for the relatedness part, they first switch from raw chunks to short, entity-specific propositions. And chunks mix multiple topics, but they easily get too long when they group by entity and can be redundant. But propositions are concise factual statements tied to clear entities. So the authors rewrite text to resolve references, then extract entities and propositions using a large language model, and use the extracted entities and propositions to fine-tune a smaller large language model to scale. And finally, they drop the propositions without valid entities to avoid noise from weak common nouns. Here we can see example. Then the invalid propositions includes no useful information, but could be related to entities like drug. We can see the proposition 1 in this figure. It says the drug sales are rich in records, high as new therapies, blah, blah. And we can see there are many entities like drugs, they will be, or therapies, they will be related to maybe a query we want to ask, but there's no such useful information in it. So actually the real proposition we want is the proposition 2, then we can see the different, like the names or the different the locations or something useful like that. And here I will quickly show the prompt of their rewrite prompt and their the entity extraction prompt and their proposition extraction prompt. Next, the other group propositions then share the same entities into proposition aggregates, as I mentioned before. And each aggregate acts like a persuaded document, which is obviously clearer and less redundant than the raw trunk. They then run the Raptor style pipeline, the clustering and recursive summaries on these aggregates to build the relatedness tree. Because many propositions mention multiple entities, a single proposition can belong to multiple aggregates, which gives soft clustering for free, and they are very suitable. And the shared propositions also boost embedding similarity, so related aggregates stay together even at higher levels. And for efficiency, they index only the aggregates and their summaries, and later flatten all these nodes into the unified retrieve pool. And finally, after building the similarity and the relatedness trees independently, all nodes from both trees are flattened into a single retrieval pool, and they will be used in the RAG system. Here's the experimental setup. The authors, they evaluate models using the EM and F1 metrics on final QA answers. They do not report retrieval-only scores because methods like the SiReRAG and the Raptor, they build different retrieval pools by adding new nodes or new summaries or new propositions aggregates. So comparing retrieval recall across different pools would be unfair. So they just use end-to-end QA metric instead. And for efficiency, they use average time per query, which measures the how long it takes to answer a question. And we also report TPER, the time pool efficiency ratio. And TPER is the growth in total inference time divided by the growth in pool size between two methods. If TPER is less than 1, it means the time increase is more than the pool size increase, which indicates the reasonable efficiency. We can see from those tables that the SiReRAG outperforms the main baselines, the Raptor, the HippoRAG, and the GraphRAG. And compared to Raptor, the SiReRAG improves the average F1 score by about 5 points, and compared to the HippoRAG, it's up to 8.3 F1 points better on the music question dataset. Compared to the GraphRAG, it is more than 20 points higher on average EM and F1. But here's the question: why does it happen? We can see the Raptor model similarity only, and the HippoRAG focuses only on relatedness. But however, we can see there's a the HippoRAG they outperforms in one data set that is better than the SiReRAG. We know the Raptor models, even though the SiReRAG combines both the similarity and the relatedness, so it retrieves a more complete evidence set for multi-hop questions. But there's one exception. On TrueWiki, the HippoRAG is much more stronger, just like the dataset is especially likely because the dataset is especially entity-centric. But on other datasets, the SiReRAG is stronger overall. Here is a more precise and detailed experiment about how these one-hop and multi-hop questions they perform on these different methods. The author also conducted a series of experiments. Like for single hop questions derived from the music question dataset, the SiReRAG still beats Raptor, but the gap is smaller because single hop task needs less synthesis. But on the multi-hop RAG benchmark, the SiReRAG again outperforms Raptor, which matches our main result as number of hops increases. Combining similarity and the relatedness becomes more valuable. And overall, the game's growth as tasks require more multi-hop reasoning. The author also examined the applicability. They use SiReRAG as the upstream indexing step and then plug in different retrieval methods. with both BM25 and the Cobra version 2. They're running on the SiReRAG retrieval pool yields significant the QA gains. And this shows SiReRAG complements a non-indexing method by providing stronger candidates to re-rank. But by contrast, Raptor only improve music question dataset and degrades on the other datasets. So its utility is less consistent for multi-hop reasoning. Here it comes to the limitations and conclusions. About the limitations, first, this approach depends on the quality of the proposition and entity extraction. This is very obvious, right? And if extraction is noisy or costly, errors and the latency can propagate. But second, the unified retrieval pool is larger, so time per query goes up. Even though the TPER, as I mentioned before, below 1 shows the time growth is still reasonable, but when we use a very large the documents pool, it will also be a problem. The third one is the entity ambiguity and the domain drift can hurt aggregation if names are inconsistent or shift across domains. That means we cannot use we cannot train a very general one and easily transferring different domains. And the conclusions, the author index both similarity and the relatedness to achieve a more comprehensive knowledge synthesis. And it addresses the bottleneck of using only one signal on multi-hop benchmarks. And in addition, the SiReRAG can serve as an upstream improvement for other non-indexing methods in a rack setup, such as a BM25 or Cobra version 2. And that's all for today's presentation. If you have any questions, and can I kindly ask Betty to stop the recording? Thank you.